Welcome to The Journey. I'm Marlena Compston, and I want to welcome you back to our show with Mallory Moseby. This is, again, part two of a two-part series. Um, the first we called, remind me, Mallory, because I'm not
Uh,
going to say it right, Moving Forward.
Walking Harrison home, I think was
Yes, that is
yes.
definitely one. And then the other one is,
March 4th in battle.
yes, because you said that is something that was really important to Harrison.
Yes.
That is something that he said.
Yes, that was March 4th was the day that he got diagnosed, and so they came up with the saying March 4th in battle. So,
As I was preparing this morning for our podcast, prayerfully, I was just praying over you and your girls, and praying about the podcast and the things that we would be sharing back and forth. And I may have mentioned it on the first podcast, Mal, but I was thinking about Harrison's faithfulness as he shared the word in scripture with us. And it just seemed like no matter how much pain he was in, no matter what he was going through, I know the end of our last podcast you mentioned this morning was about the amputation, and we'll
hmm
start with that. But just think of everything that this young man was going through, everything that his family was going through. Let me push that off one moment. Everything that his world was going through in their world. And he still faithfully shared God, and he still faithfully was sharing with us that God is faithful and that to never give up. And with that said, Mallory, I'm going to let you start in where we left
hmm
on podcast one.
Okay. Um, so we left off at the amputation site, but I'm going to go back just a little bit, or the amputation. I'm going to go back just a little bit and share, about just something that happened when we were in Houston. So Harrison was having to receive like a lot of blood transfusions, during the time when we were down in Houston. He had, O negative blood, which is very rare. And so there was one specific time that he needed a blood transfusion, and they came up to his room and said, "Hey, we don't have O negative blood, but we will give you O positive. You shouldn't have any reaction to it, but we're going to give you this for your transfusion, and it should do the same thing." Well, us knowing his history, he had already had O positive blood in the past, and he was the lucky one that had reactions to it. He would have a reaction. It was almost within about 5 minutes of receiving the blood.
Mhm.
He started feeling symptoms of it. And it was completely different from when he had O positive versus O negative. Like O negative, he felt great with it. You could tell that he was starting to feel good, when he would receive the right blood, and then with the positive, he would not. Um, but we had Harrison had made a post that they only had 3 bags of blood. They came in and said that they had to save those bags for pregnant women. Which yes, you do. We had made the post and it went viral, and all of a sudden, MD Anderson was flooded with people trying to go down there to donate blood. I mean, from all over the US, we were receiving messages, saying like, "How can we donate?" Um, MD Anderson had no idea what was going on, because they knew is that people were donating for Harrison and for the hospital, and they they were like, "Where is this coming from?" But all of a sudden they had no more appointments. They had enough blood to give him. They had enough blood for his surgery, to give him O negative. And so that was just a blessing that God provided for us and provided for the other people in the hospital, because there were so many people that needed that blood and they weren't going to have enough. So I just think that's amazing how just one simple post went viral, and we never thought it would. But so back to the amputation surgery. It was a 14-hour surgery. And I think it was about 18 hours total that he was gone from us, like 2 hours before and like pre-op, getting him ready. And then 2 hours afterwards. So it was a long time of waiting. We this like each time they finished the I think there were 4 different parts of the surgery, and each time the surgeon would finish a part of the surgery, they would come out and talk to us or call us on the phone. And that was hard waiting and sitting there in the waiting room, just waiting for them to come out, knowing that they said it would only take about like 3 hours for their part, but it was an extra hour, or we wouldn't hear from them and we were still waiting. So that was really hard. Just waiting through that period and not knowing if he was okay, because we knew that it was going to be an extensive surgery. Um, but once he was out of the surgery, like I said, it was about 2 hours until we could see him. Um, I had gone up to his room and was waiting for him to arrive in his room. And I see him being pushed on his bed, and they came around the corner, and he just had the biggest smile on his face when he saw me. And in that moment, it broke me. Just seeing him just so happy, and knowing, like, Harrison, you just your arm, but yet you're still smiling. And um, I think he even tried giving me a thumbs up, like, as he came around, and it's all kind of a blur, but I was hurting in that moment, just seeing him just smiling, and here I am, just I just wasn't expecting to see him so happy. And um after I don't know, it's hard to express
Again,
those emotions because it was such a hard moment right there.
right. And again, it speaks to his faith, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And it speaks
It
to just the
does.
man that he was.
Hmm.
And I've shared often on the podcast, it seems like in the last few months, about when Paul was in prison, and we know prison wasn't, I mean, I know it's not a great place now, but it was really bad back in the day. We're talking dirty, musty, wet, nasty. I can only imagine the food was complete slop. They were probably exposed to rats and you name it. And Paul, in his chains, is still writing to us, be content in all things. And I see that. I see that in the spirit with Harrison, that he had made a determination, it seems, Mallory, in his life, and you knew him certainly better than most of us. Um, but he made a determination that he was going to be content in all things and trust God in all things, wasn't he?
He was. I think just having peace, knowing that God was in control of the situation, um, that that really helped him get through, knowing that he was going to be okay because God has him, and whatever was going to happen, it God has him. Like, God was there holding his hand,
True.
and I think of that as I go through life now, that God has it. God truly is holding me, and that helps me get through each day.
I love that. And here you are with the girls. Were you still pregnant with Grace when he had the amputation?
No, I had her, so we had the amputation May 25th, and I had her May 1st.
Okay.
So it was about 24 days.
Here
It
you
it
are,
was
a new
rough.
mom.
It was really rough, but
Here you are, a new mom again.
yes.
We know that the hormone levels can be all over the place after having a baby.
Hmm.
Here, your husband is in Houston, and I think you had shared with me at some point that didn't your parents drive you or your parents?
Yes, my parents drove me and both my girls down about 3 or 2 later.
Exactly. Okay.
It was a lot. It just happened so quick, and it was a lot to process all at once. I was in the hospital, then I was home, and then I was heading to go see my husband, and it a lot just happened in those couple of days where it was probably one of the hardest times of my life.
Oh, can only
Um,
imagine.
Especially having to be away from him and knowing that he was hurting, and just that I wasn't there to help comfort him and just to be with him, that really hurt me.
And I can speak for, I think, literally thousands upon thousands of people, Mallory, including myself, that were seeing your posts or his posts, and you all didn't know me at all, and I didn't know you at all. But I know I was just one of the people that would right out of prayer. I mean, there were so many thousands of people praying for you all. And these moments in life like this, it doesn't even have to be this deep of an emergency situation, but the enemy will come at us with fear and with anxiety, and with words of things will never be okay or God will never heal you. And that's when our faith has to step in and become action. And those times are when I say, place it at the foot of the cross. Did you feel like you were doing that every day, Mallory?
Yes, it every day, just waking up and um learning to seek the Lord first, I think was important because how you wake up is what controls my mindset. So I know that if I'm waking up in chaos and I start stressing, I know that I'm just letting the enemy get to me. So I think learning when we were down in Houston that, wake up and seek God first, then I had a peace about me, and peace within me. And so did Harrison. That would just flow throughout us during the day.
I keep getting chills. One of my favorite verses is Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And I know within the precept upon precept within the scripture, it's not necessarily speaking about what we're speaking about. But you and I both know when you're filled with the Spirit, that verse in itself just becomes part of you, just like Jeremiah 29:11,
Mhm.
which so many people will quote. And man, when that scripture of, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to not harm you, but to give you hope and a future, when that becomes like part of us, like it's entrenched in us, it's our bones have soaked that up. And that again is why I had to reach out to you months ago to say, I hope you'd be willing to do a podcast to share the love and the life that you have had with Harrison, and now you and your girls are carrying on from here. So I'll hush again and let you
You're
just move forward and speak about what was going on at that time.
okay. So after the amputation, the 48 hours after the surgery were critical. Um, we had to keep him upright on his other shoulder, and he couldn't put any pressure on his amputation site because if he would, he could possibly like it could fail. So the first 48 hours were really critical. It was scary just because he went through the surgery. We wanted everything to be right.
Mm.
um so 24 hours after the surgery he was able to finally get up and sit in a chair. That was painful to watch. It was hard. Just like learning your balance and learning how to work your body, but also while he was in pain, it was hard for him. Um, but as soon as he did it, he was so happy. He was proud of himself that he was able to sit there. He wasn't able to sit there very long. It was painful, but he did it. Each day was a new challenge. We faced new challenges. Pretty much every couple of hours there was always something.
Mm.
We would get behind on pain meds, or he would his not only the amputation site would start hurting, but a new cancer area would start hurting. It got to the point about a couple days after the amputation that the new cancer sites that were growing were hurting worse than the surgery site.
Mm.
um so that just tells you how painful it is when you have cancer. And when those spots were growing, he was in excruciating pain on his like leg area, hip, back, neck. All of it hurt, and it hurt worse than the amputation area. But it it was just hard. Everything it was just really hard during that time. But seeing Harrison just keep his eyes fixed on God really helped me just stay focused on what was important, and just not to dwell in the painful times, just to live it by the moment, and God was going to provide for us and give us everything that we needed. And that's all we needed to like that's all we needed to keep us going.
Did you, if this is a fair question, Did he have moments, because we're all just human, did he have moments that he just wanted to give up?
He did. And I think that's when God gave me the strength to help lift him up during that time because I had moments too. And that's when he was weak, I was strong. And when I was weak, he was strong. And um, it's amazing how God would just give each other, like us, the strength to, or words to say to uplift each other, to keep fighting because it's hard. Just when you don't see an end in the valley and you don't see when it's going to end, that's hard to keep going. But God just kept reminding us, like this life is not for you, like it's for me just to glorify me. And once you know that, once you see that, then you realize that there is purpose in that life. And when you're in that valley, it doesn't matter when like if you ever even get out, like you're going to keep going because you have one purpose, and that's to glorify him.
Mm. Speak it, sister. Like,
So,
seriously.
we ended up getting to go home on June 4th. I think it was like 11 days after the amputation. They had a coming home parade for us, and I promise you that was probably one of the greatest days of Harrison's life. Getting to see everyone just supporting him and the fire department in the town. I mean, he was in tears as we were driving through the town, just seeing everyone and just knowing that he's loved, and he just felt so supported. And when you're going through like something like this, you feel like you're alone, but just seeing everyone come together and supporting him really made him feel loved, and not only him, but me. So that was really important, and that played an important role in the journey just because he realized how much support that he really did have and how many prayers were going up to the Lord. So that was really important to both of us. But 4 days after us coming home, we ended up back up into the ER. He ended up having an infection. They called it a hematoma mass underneath the skin flap area. That's where he had the amputation. And we had to go back up to MD Anderson. So once we got back up to MD Anderson, they did scans, they got the infection under control, but we found out that the cancer had spread, like doubled since his last scan in May.
Mm.
Um, I want to say they said that there were over a dozen tumor sites in his body. So that was really hard to hear, just knowing that, we were off chemo for so long so he could do the amputation, and now the cancer's just spread. Um, but um, the Tulsa Fire Department at that time, they ended up doing a little, um, I don't even know what it was, just a run for him, where they ran 505 miles altogether. I think there were over 200 people that ran,
Mm.
and that was how far it was from Tulsa to Houston.
Mm.
And so different people would run a certain set of miles. But his station came up and ran the last 2 miles around MD Anderson.
Mm.
And that Harrison was so excited to see them. So we had just found out the bad news, and then they came up and they were cheering him on, and they were running around MD Anderson. And um, Harrison, we actually were able to go outside and see his guys, but it took everything he had just to be able to go out there and see them. I, he was crying. I was about to start crying just because he was in pain, and it was emotional getting to see them do that. And it was emotional for Harrison, just knowing that he wasn't able to do that with them. And so that was hard. Um, but then after so we ended up getting to go back home. We started a new chemo, and then 6 months or 6 weeks later, we had another scan, and we went back up to MD Anderson for that scan. And that's one of the ones that I knew, like this is getting pretty bad. Um, I had to push him to the scan, to like the radiology site, and we struggled. I could hardly even get him there because of how hard it was to get him in the wheelchair just over to the x-ray or the radiology room. It was I want to say it was about a mile or a mile and a half walk from where we were at, from the building to that, and pushing him. He couldn't keep, they didn't have the, I guess, like the feet handles on the wheelchair, and he was having to lift up his leg when he didn't have hardly any ability to do that. And so we had to keep stopping every
Mhm.
couple of feet just to give him a break. And we were running late, and it was hard. I was crying, he was crying, and he was hurting. And as soon as we got there, I looked at the nurse. I was like, he's gonna need some pain meds now because he's hurting. Um, so luckily we got him taken care of, and they got him medicine before he went back to his PET scan. But we eventually found out like the cancer had spread again. So just as soon as we would think that we were on the right track, getting on a different chemo, this is going to work, it's like, no, no, we're going to take a couple more steps back where the cancer spread. Um, so after after that visit, the doctor switched his chemo. They wanted to start him on something called the Red Devil. Harrison was pretty determined this chemo was not going to get him down just because they call it the Red Devil. But that with that chemo, he was going to have to stay in the hospital for a period of, I think it was 5 days to a week, because of how it depletes your system when they do it. So he started it on the first day, and we started noticing that he was having some symptoms and some bad side effects of it. And then by that night, they had to stop him and completely take him off of it because of how it was affecting him. The doctors were saying it was unsafe for him to even do it. And then that's when they started bringing up, like, I think you have weeks instead of months to live. Um, so that was hard just because we knew it was coming, but we didn't know, we thought we had more time.
And
Um,
what
and that,
frame was that, Mallory? Remind me, was that
and
June?
what was what?
What time frame was that? June, July?
That was in August.
Okay,
Hmm.
okay. Yeah, I remember specifically praying like after the amputation, and then like you all had the bad scan. And
Hmm.
I know all of us were included, of course you as well and your family. We're just holding on, like Lord,
Yes.
heal this man, Lord. Please, Lord, heal this man. And I'll again just inserting the fact that it's like I think all of our faith grew um through the heartache and the devastation. And again, not one time do I remember on Facebook, on social media, any post of Harrison ever being like, okay, guys, I'm done. Maybe there was and I missed it. I just don't remember anything like that. He was going to forge, say that phrase again, move. I'm saying it.
Mar March 4th in battle. Yes.
Yes. He was marching forth and he wasn't going to let the enemy win. And I was talking to my cousin this morning and I was sharing with her dad is my first cousin. And I'm like, yeah, your dad and I talk about, because he's 81. And we talk about, hey, we're really looking forward to going to glory. But we don't think it's time quite yet. But to get there, unless you pass away in your sleep, there's some process in there, right? And would we not have loved for you to be able to keep Harrison here with you and the girls for
Hmm.
many, many, many more years? And God, we don't always understand your purpose and your pathway, but through the faith that you allow us to have in our heart, Lord, we grow and we learn and we press in, even when it's hard and when it's so tough. And again, it's just Mallory's message of how she and Harrison were pressing forward. So,
Hmm. So one thing that I really focused on, and what I've realized after going through all of this, is that, while you're waiting, um, it matters. And what you do while you're waiting, it truly does matter, because you can be bitter and sad and just lose your hope, or you let that waiting period help you grow. You dive in deep to God, and your love for him grows, and he can really use you in that waiting period. And I think that if we would have chosen the other way, God he wouldn't have been able to use us like he did. And so waiting has purpose. And although it stings and I hate waiting, I'm impatient, God does have a plan for that waiting period. And I think you have to realize that you have to let him use you during that. And you have to grow during that waiting period, or otherwise you can miss what God has in front of you.
I think that what you just said, waiting has purpose. That has to be three of the wisest words I've ever heard, Mallory.
Um, It, I'm still waiting, you know, um, but I know that through all this hurt, there's going to be something great, and I know that because of Jesus, um, and I may have to. It might be an eternity that I get that, and that's okay. But I know that God has a plan, and I just have to keep trusting that. But with Harrison, after we were in the hospital and they told us, hospice weeks to months, it was like our walls were just caving in on us. It was like doctor after doctor, and just everyone wanted to talk about hospice. Just kept bringing it up, and Harrison and I had already talked about it. We knew it would get to this point. Um, we weren't we knew about it. We had people coming in and explaining it to us, but we knew that wasn't right. It wasn't the time yet. And we knew that God would provide us with that in our hearts when it was time to go and go that route. And he did. But that was hard, just to continue hearing all of, like, you only have weeks to live, or maybe a month, or maybe 2 months. That was hard for us to hear, just because we knew that it wasn't time. Like, we had to keep fighting, and to try not to get discouraged during that time, that was tough. Especially for me, just because I am sitting here watching my husband get told, like, you only have a couple of weeks left with your girls. And that was hard for me to hear, but also it just felt negative. I don't know another way to describe it. I mean, no one thinks hospice is fun, and especially when you're 26. And so that was hard. But once we realized, like, God's going to open that door when the time is right, and he'll place it on our hearts. We just held on to that, and we're like, no, we're going to keep fighting. And so after the doctors in Tulsa stopped chemo, the Red Devil, we eventually got to go up to MD Anderson. They life flighted us up there. So Harrison and I flew in this tiny little plane. I held his hand the whole entire time. We were both drenched in sweat. There was no air. We made it there, and the once we finally got settled in, and the doctors came by, they were like, okay, we'll try a different chemo, and then we'll also try doing radiation on some of the sites that are hurting.
At
So
at least a little bit of hope, right?
yes, exactly. So it was left Tulsa and didn't have any hope,
Mhm.
or we had hope, but it was like there's no hope left in treatment. To MD Anderson, and they're saying, okay, we'll start you on a different chemo, and then we will radiate some of the sites that are hurting. So this was around September 8th when we arrived up there, and Harrison had actually lost his ability to walk by that time because of how painful it was. So they started on his hip. And about, I want to say, like 2 days later, he was able to walk. It wasn't great, but he was able to walk with assistance, and he was able to get from his bed to a chair, or just to take a couple of steps. He was pretty proud of that. Eventually he was able to walk a little bit more. especially if he was pushing a wheelchair, but it still wasn't like what he was able to do before, in the past. And then since he had such good results with the hip, the doctor decided to go ahead and radiate some of the areas on his neck, since those were giving him pain too. So they did that, and then I think they completed that around September 24th, and then we got to go home. But then on November 2nd, he had a bad fall getting out of bed. This was actually his second he had had. The first time I was able to get him up, but the second time I couldn't. So we called his brother who lived right around the corner from us, and he came over and helped me get him up. But it was hard once he fell because I couldn't do anything, and we were both crying. We both felt helpless, and I just sat there and held him until his brother could get there to help me lift him up. But we were trying to he was in a lot of pain too. So we were just sitting there crying, and he was like, he was, as I was crying, he was like, "It's okay. I know you're doing everything you can." And I'm gonna cry thinking about it. But he was still trying to encourage me as he's hurting and in pain on the ground, and just letting me know, like, you're doing a good job, like you're doing everything you can. So November 2nd, he had a fall, and then he wasn't able to walk after that. November 9th, we had our last trip to MD Anderson, and he had scans. I had to go in there with him to the scans, and I actually had to lift him up on the bed to get him into the or the, like the PET scan bed, because the um, I guess like the x-ray tech wasn't able to lift him because he didn't know where to grab him, because he had so many tumors on his back, and if you grabbed him in the wrong spot, it would hurt him. So I remember lifting him up there, and I was like, God, like, it's getting hard, God. And we went to our scans, and then the doctor ended up telling us, like, there's nothing else we can do. It's everywhere. It's spread. And the only thing that you can do is hospice. And Harrison and I were prepared for that. We knew in our hearts that it was getting close to that time. But Harrison, as soon as the doctor said that, he looked at me and he said, "Good." And he wanted all odds against it. He didn't want, like, in his mind, he didn't want it to be anything but God that could have healed him. He didn't want anyone to say, it was the chemo, it was the doctors, it was the surgery. He wanted it to only be God if he were to be healed. And so we both walked out, and I remember looking at him and saying, "Okay, Harrison." And we both just smiled. And so we went back home, and we didn't call hospice immediately. It still didn't feel right yet. We were still fighting, we were just fighting on our own. And through prayer and scripture and just, I was begging God to heal him, and he had another plan. So it was December 14th, Harrison was going to be awarded um, an award from, or it was an honorary award from the Midwestern Seminary School, and we had to go up to his fire station to receive it. Well, to get up there was a struggle. It was probably one of the hardest times that we had, just getting him out of bed, getting him dressed in his suit, and just getting him in the car. It was hard. And by the time we got in the car and we pulled out of the neighborhood, and got on the highway, Harrison looked at me and he said, "It's time to call hospice." And I knew right then, I was like, God, it is time. And I said, "Okay." So we had to go to this award ceremony, and we both put on a smile on our face. And it was hard just because of how much we were hurting, knowing that, like, God just opened that door for us for hospice, but yet no one around us except for us. And so after the award, we got back in the car, and he said, "Okay, babe, it's time to call." And I looked at him, I was like, "Are you really being serious? Like, I know it's time, but are you sure?" And he was like, "Yes." So we went ahead and called, and hospice came out the next day. Um, and it was amazing. We were blessed with the best hospice nurse, and just such a godly Christian lady. And she prayed with us, and Harrison loved her, and his pain was finally able to be under control. And I mean, he was happy, and I was happy just because he was in so much pain. But I truly think that God waited to put that on our hearts until that time, because he was giving us time together, to have those hard conversations, for Harrison to be with the girls, for us to spend that quality time together. Because once he went on hospice, he was sleeping a lot more, just because he wasn't in pain, and the medication that they put him on made him sleepy.
Right.
So I'm thankful for the time that God gave us together, um, during that whole thing, because it was a big part of how, like, I'm able to, I don't even know, like, it was so important for that time, because it so many intentional moments together, just having hard conversations, and for the girls to get to watch movies with him, and for Collins to still see her dad smiling. She still remembers those times, and I have videos of it. So I'm just thankful for that time. Um, so after we called hospice, he was on it for a couple of weeks. We spent Christmas together and New Year's together. And then after New Year's, he eventually started going downhill. We could see a pretty rapid decline, um, to where he wasn't talking as much. He was sleeping more. He was still awake probably a couple hours out of the day, but it wasn't like what it was before in the past. So we knew, it's getting closer. So on, believe it's January 15th, they thought he was going to pass that night. He didn't, he pulled through. And so it was about almost a week, I think, in total, of us just not knowing, like, is he going to pass tonight? Is he going to pass right now? And that was hard. We, it was just hard. Just having to watch him suffer, and not that he was in pain, but you could tell, you know, when someone's dying, just like hearing the sounds of it, and just watching him not be himself is hard
Mm.
to watch. And then he ended up passing on January 22nd.
Mm. I have a question.
Hmm.
Did you feel like, days before he passed, did you feel like God gave you like a clue as to how close it was? I don't know that we always get that, but I know I had that with my dad.
So I didn't know it at the time, but after, like, reflecting on it and looking back, Harrison was kind of in and out of it when he was talking, but he knew what he was saying, or because he would respond back to us. Well, he was in the room. I believe it was me and my brothers and maybe one of his friends. And like, he was picking up, answering the station phone, and he said, "Hi, this is Harrison Moseby, station 22." Um, and that's all he said. And I looked at him and I said, "Harrison, you're station 24. You know that." He's always known that. And I said, "You're not at station 22." And he said, "Oh," and kind of laughed it off, and we played it off. But I think that was a clue from God, like, it's coming soon,
Hmm.
on the 22nd. And number 22 is my favorite number. So it,
You go.
yeah, it was just God providing peace around all of it, knowing that his hand was in the midst of that. Um, so I bet it was about an hour before he passed. It was just him and I and the girls in bed. And I remember looking at him and just hugging him and whispering, like, "Okay, baby, like, we're okay. We're gonna be fine." Um, I'm gonna start crying.
Or you're
Um,
gonna make me cry too.
and I was like, it's okay to go now. Like, we're gonna be okay. And about an hour later, he passed, and I had never said that to him until that moment, and I know, like, in my heart that, like, he was holding on for me to be ready,
And it was
and
probably, I've heard
it
so
was
many times, he was
yes.
waiting on probably when
Mhm,
you gave him, they say, permission that he could go. He did.
mhm, and I know, like, God had a perfect time for that because he knew I'd be ready like in this moment. And I had peace with it. Then say like on the 15th, I wouldn't have had peace because I just wasn't ready. But on the 22nd, I was. And his parents were in the room with us, and both my girls, we were all just holding him and touching him. Even our dog was laying on him. And so he had all of his favorite people there, and it was just perfect. And um, I just remember checking his pulse with the last breath that he took, and I could feel the last pulse, and then all of a sudden there was nothing. Um, and just knowing that he went to be with the Lord in that moment is beautiful. And knowing that in the midst of our pain, I got to watch my husband meet Jesus. It I look back on that moment and I'll play it in my head a lot. And I can't wait to go to meet Jesus too. And I just pray that my walk with God is as great as it was with him, and that I run my race like I'm called to.
Well, and again, it's like my friend Dee is actually the one that, when I was sharing with her how excited I was that you said yes, I will podcast. And it just came out of her mouth, walking Harrison home. And that is truly what happened. And if I were the person to write your movie, we've talked about, I just truly believe with all my heart that this whole faith journey that you two walked through together, as you're sharing like his last moments, what I'm seeing in my mind's eye is when you shared about when you two, I think you were walking down the stairs and he was walking up, or the other way
Mhm.
around, and you just caught each other's eye. It's that.
Mhm.
It's that moment right there. God already knew what was planned, and he knew
Mhm.
that you were the woman and the helpmeet that would stand by him through it all. And again, boy, what I love, and everyone that knows you or doesn't know you love, for you all to never have had to walk through this journey, but you did. And you spoke and breathed life into many of us with your faith, just as you're doing even now. So I just appreciate so much you sharing.
Well, thank you. I just know that I wouldn't be where I am today without God, but then also God gave Harrison the strength to help grieve this with me during these past couple of years, 2 years. Um, because I am not a talker. I don't like to talk about my feelings, but Harrison made me. And I think Harrison knowing how I am and knowing that, like that I needed that, like God gave him the strength to have those hard conversations with me. And so after every day at the hospital, he would ask me, "How are you feeling? Like, what do you think about this?" And just knowing that he was able to walk through that grieving process with me really helps, and it really put me in a better spot today than where I would be if he didn't do that. Because we were able to talk and talk it through, and that's really important to me. And I'm thankful that God gave us that time to do that and have that intentional time together, to be able to grow and fall more in love with each other, also, um, while we're in the midst of our storm. Um, and like I said at the beginning of the podcast, on the first podcast, that we felt once we got married, we felt like we were in a slump. We weren't in that slump anymore. even though we were in the what people would say the hardest times of our lives, we were the happiest that we had ever been. And that was because of how in love we were with each other, but also with God, and knowing that we were actually um like following our calling that he had for us, and just walking with him. It helped us grow, and we were happy. And I can't say it wouldn't have been the same if we didn't do that. And if we didn't have God with us.
Right. What's going through my heart right now is the 23rd Psalm. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're with me.
Hmm.
And I was also thinking Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those that are called according to his purposes. And Mallory, I know that you would never want anyone to brag on you, but I'm going to brag on you. You're beautiful. You have a beautiful heart. You faithfully, lovingly, caringly, if that's a word, stood by your husband through thick and thin. You never left, and that's part of the story, is love doesn't leave, love stays. And that is the beauty also of the love our Heavenly Father has for us and with us through all of our journeys, whether high or low. And I just thank you so much for coming on the journey and sharing the journey of the love and the faith of you and Harrison and your girls. And boy, didn't he leave two beautiful little legacies right there?
He did. They are a blessing. I'm so thankful that I get to watch them grow up, and I get a reminder of him, and that's amazing. It truly is. And to have both of them look like him, it's precious, and it's amazing how God works. And I get to, when I have a bad day, I get to look at them and I'm like, you know what? It's all right. It's going to be okay. God's
I
going to carry
love
me
that.
through.
I
And that's just one of God's little faithful promises right there, is getting to look at them. And I'm thankful for that.
No doubt. Well, again, I so thank you for being on the journey. And to those of you that have listened today, and be sure to go back and listen to Mallory's part one on the journey, and just consider how faithful God is, even when life looks really bad, even when there's no money in the bank account, or even when you get a bad diagnosis. God walks through all of it with us. Absolutely, he does. He doesn't cause these things to happen. He walks with us through it all. And I just thank you again for being here with us. And we will sign off today. Mallory Moseby, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week on the journey.